Thank you. Thank you and welcome. So pleased that you came out to join us for this very exciting program. Our guest speakers are Andy Palmer, CEO of Aston Martin, and Geoffrey Moore, distinguished consultant, author, and speaker. I'd like to welcome our speakers and thank you very much for joining us as well. Famous for creating some of the most beautiful cars in history and for its 50-year association with James Bond, Aston Martin is undergoing a fundamental turnaround as it embarks on its most aggressive new model launch in its 102-year history. From connected car technologies to electrification, I think we'll hear this morning about how Aston Martin might stay true to its core mission of crafting beautiful, handcrafted cars and while breaking new ground with technology and products that never have been associated with the brand previously. So we have a fascinating discussion ahead of us, but first, thanks are in order to Simon Sproul of Aston Martin, Alan Liu from Let TV, as well as Aston Martin Los Gatos. All of these people and organizations help make this event possible, so please help me thank them with our applause. About the Churchill Club for a moment here, for our new guests in the audience. We are a member-supported, not-for-profit educational forum, very deeply rooted in the technology and business space. We've been operating here in the Bay Area as the premier institution of its type for just about 30 years, and we are always looking to surface new insights and opportunities for innovation, for economic growth and societal benefit, and to connect people in the audience together who would like to work together to push it forward. Next up, we present drones on August 20, artificial intelligence startups on August 26, and John Chen, the CEO of BlackBerry, on August 28. And the 5th annual Churchills, which is one of our most anticipated programs each year, will be held on September 24th. That program is all about highlighting excellence to inspire us. And I'll announce to you tonight that two of the honorees are Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, as our legendary leader, and Pixar Animation Studios and Ed Catmull as our magical team. We hope that you will be able to join us for some, if not all, of those special programs. If you tweet this morning, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in the programs. And I will now introduce our speakers, starting with Geoffrey. One of the most respected business advisors and authors in the world, Geoffrey Moore's life's work has focused on the market dynamics surrounding disruptive innovation. His first book, Crossing the Chasm, remains the Bible for bringing cutting-edge products to progressively larger markets. His most recent work, Escape Velocity, addresses the challenge that large enterprises face when they seek to add a new line of business to their established portfolio. This has been the basis of much of his recent work, but I understand that there is a new work in the works, so please keep an eye out for that. Andy Palmer has been in the automotive industry since age 16, having started, I believe it was a parts supply setting, and he worked his way up to become one of the top 3 executives at Nissan Renault, working with Carlos Ghosn, and just last fall took on Aston Martin as their CEO. And when I asked Simon Sproul, his right-hand marketing and PR person, to tell me something about Andy, he said, he's an engineer. That's where he comes from in his thinking. So we have a really great conversation, I'm confident, in store for us. Let me turn it over to Geoffrey.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks. Thank you, Karen. And the Churchill Club. So you know, we have a lot of interest in this valley in iconic companies, and Aston Martin is one. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to touch on a series of topics with Andy. I'm going to ask him about his business model. In each case, I'm interested in what's kind of novel in the Aston Martin world. His business model, the engineering in the car, the manufacturing, this user experience, and then maybe the marketing. And then we're going to open it up to you guys to say, okay, follow-up questions. By the way, if you reach under your seat and find the keys to an Aston Martin, actually, no, I suggested it, but it didn't. I know, it seemed like a good idea. Okay, but Andy, so I'm going to start with that business model and kind of work up the thing. So the business model at Aston Martin, briefly, what is it?
102 years of losing money.
Yes. And in how many times have you actually gone bankrupt?
Oh, only 7 times.
Only 7.
We like the number 7, 007. 7 times bankrupt. We're very comfortable with 7. Very lucky for us.
So this is not an easy business model.
It's a broken business model.
Okay, so Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I think we do expect a different result, so I hope we're doing something different. Is that true?
Well, I hope that we're not insane. No, I mean, seriously,
yeah.
the brand is iconic. The cars, I hope you will agree, are beautiful. There's a little company down the road that has a button that says ludicrous. We've been making ludicrous cars for 102 years. The problem is that the business model that we've been working with never creates sufficient profit per unit times volume to allow it to fund the next generation of vehicles. And that's why fundamentally we've toyed with death so many times and actually been dead and resuscitated on 7 occasions. And that's a business model which clearly doesn't work. It doesn't work for us, it didn't work for Ferrari, it didn't work for Porsche, and it didn't work for a whole bunch of other companies. In the case of Ferrari, in the case of Porsche, they changed their business model. We have to change our business model also.
But without losing the secret sauce, right? Without losing the magic.
The source, which we define as power, beauty, and soul, and I think power and beauty is obvious. The soul is the je ne sais quoi of the brand, James Bond racing, whatever you want to call it. That must never be traded. That is not tradable.
Okay.
But basically, we have to do something else, and something else is not that difficult to imagine. To be frank, I mean, it may surprise you to know that in 102 years. We've made 70,000 cars only. 70,000.
Total.
That's it. So for all of those that say...
700 a year for 100 years.
Well, it's basically what my old company made in 2 weeks. And of that 70,000 cars, less than half of them left the shores of the UK.
Okay.
Only 2,000 were sold in the so-called BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
Okay.
And unbelievably, and I see there's a lot of women around the room, less than 3,500 were sold to women. Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense, right? We have to find a way of reaching those new audiences and appreciating the craftsmanship, the heritage, the beauty that goes into making these cars.
So if I understand then, just on business model, we're not going to change the creation of the model. We're going to change the marketing span. We're going to go into new markets.
Well, we're going to do 3. Of course, we're going to market differently. Right. I mean, the biggest advocates of our car are actually women, but they don't drive them. I mean, we can ask around the room why you don't drive them, and I can sign you up at the door to get one. But there are. It
is a little bit of a 6-figure expense, but master charge, I believe, is taken.
I'm sure that we can do a very nice lease deal. There is. In the first instance, we have to recreate the portfolio that we have.
Okay.
We're a luxury sports car company. We make hand-built sports cars, and we need to replace that portfolio, and we will. So basically, the DB9, the Vantage, and the Vanquish will be replaced over the coming 2 or 3 years. On top of that, we have to look at the broken model and look at where we can expand our reach.
Yeah.
Now, if you look in the case of Ferrari continues to make sports cars, red ones mostly.
Yes.
They expanded their reach into Formula One and into other experiential activities. If you look at Porsche was a bankrupt company making the 911. It expanded its reach by creating the Cayenne and the Macan, the SUVs.
Yes.
For us, we expand our reach beyond the first pillar of the sports car we add something called the DBX. The DBX is not an SUV. It's a crossover between an SUV and a sports car. It's what we consider to be the next generation of GT cars. And it's specifically targeted at a new audience, and it's specifically tailored to fit women.
Okay, great.
Okay? So there's a new
That's
one.
a new segment.
And you may or you may not have heard of a company called Lagonda, which we own.
Okay.
And it's a very, very old company, and it used to make very beautiful cars, and we've just started making Lagondas again. It's a car brand which we define as the fastest of fine cars, and it would compete, for example, with a Rolls-Royce.
Okay.
And our intention is to reintroduce that brand towards the end of our 6-year plan, meaning that we therefore have luxury sedans as well. So with those three pillars, overlaid by what I would call two provenance vehicle lines every year, two special lines, like our Vulcan and our GT12, that essentially defines the model strategy for the next 6 years.
And if you sell 10,000 to 15,000 cars a year, will that be success?
Well, my intention is to sell only 7,000 sports cars a year.
Okay. And that's just
and that's just capped, because you've got to find a blend between the business model that works for you and exclusivity. And I would evoke here the Hermes Birkin bag experience. I don't know whether anybody in the room is going to admit to owning a Birkin bag, but if you do, then you'll know that it's extraordinarily exclusive, and you can wait years and years and years for it. And essentially, Hermes chooses you rather than you choose the bag. A wonderful model, considering they make, I think, 70,000 a year of them. But the point is, it's that exclusivity that we try to reach. And essentially, that's what we try to do with sports cars. Okay. On top of that, we will make a limited number of DBXs, the SUV, and we'll make a number of Lagondas. So talking about a number in the range of 15,000 is probably about right.
Got it. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to engine. It's a very highly specialized, handcrafted model. We're going to get to that a little bit when I ask you about the manufacturing. But I want to talk, this is an engineering valley. We care a lot about engineering in this valley, and particularly electronic engineering, but also materials and mechanical. What kinds of engineering investments do you make at Aston Martin that you think are distinctive, that are the ones that that really help define the experience and the power of the car? Where are you spending your engineering dollars today inside the car?
Well, I'm sure that many of you have seen photos of car plants, and I spent half my entire life walking around and working in car plants. They're normally easy to recognise. There's lots of these yellow arms going everywhere.
Yeah, robots.
They're full of robots. We have one robot in our entire plant. One. It's not me, by the way.
But it's clearly tokenism. I just want to say.
I know. Simon.
On behalf of the Robotic Association of America, that's tokenism.
Yes,
go ahead.
No, exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Simon has called me an engineer, but he probably called me autistic and a robot as well. We have one. It basically applies our cars are made from. I'll be very specific about this. Aluminium. Now, I need to translate that. But we're in the Churchill Club, so we should call it by its proper name, right?
Aluminium,
but you may call it aluminum.
Yeah, but whatever.
But basically, it's aluminum bonded and riveted, and the upper body is either aluminum or carbon fibre. The one area which is very integral to the crash safety of the car is the way that you apply the glue, the bonding. So we bond the bodies together, and that's where we use the robot, and we call it James Bonder.
Which passes for humor in certain... But no, go ahead.
But that's it. I mean, essentially, what makes us different? I guarantee you, if you go to any other car company around the world, rather than outside of a few cottage industries, our cars are handcrafted. Right. And we celebrate the imperfections. Now, the imperfections can't be breaking down, and they can't be, bugs and what have you. But if you look at the sew line in that car behind you, you'll find essentially the signature of the lady that has hand sewed the leather seats, and you'll see that sometimes the line is not quite straight. Well, that's because
It's
been hand sewn,
Yeah.
and that's what we celebrate, and that's what makes us different.
When I order an Aston Martin, do I specify? Is it a bespoke car? Do you build to order, or do I buy one from that's been built?
We have something called Q, and then Q can work in many ways. I mean, in the United States, of course, because you guys are a little strange in the way that you buy cars. You like to walk onto the lot, and you like to buy off the lot. In that instance, your dealer has essentially specified the car on your behalf, so you can blame him for his bad taste, or good taste, as the case may be. But likewise, any customers, we would welcome them to our factory in Gaydon. They could sit down. Marek Reitman is the chief designer, chief creatives officer, just down here, and he will sit down with you, and he'll either specify the match between your interior and your exterior colours, or frankly speaking, we can go all the way to building you a unique car. And if you Google CC100, for example, which is an Aston Martin model, there were only ever 2 of them made in its entire run. So we can do everything from bespoke leathers, bespoke colours, bespoke trim, bespoke anything, all the way through to
It's on the lot.
you want a car and you come with a big enough check, we'll make you a bespoke Aston Martin.
Got it. I want to go back to the engineering just for a second, because we do spend a lot of time with electronics, and obviously Tesla has had a huge impact on the entertainment systems, on the driving systems, etc. To what degree are there electronic based fly-by-wire or driving amplified or driving technologies in the Aston Martin?
In Aston, well, the only thing that's connected is the driver to the wheel.
Okay.
It's a superb driving experience. You don't need anything more than that, frankly speaking. So if you want gimmicks, then there's you can go down the road, I guess.
Ooh. Okay, but that's a differentiation. Okay, differentiation.
No, I mean, basically,
right.
we love and celebrate the fact that we make drivers' cars, and they're great drivers' cars. Does that mean that we reject other technologies? No. I'm not a great fan of hybrids. I'm not a great fan of downsizing engines. So I would rue the day that regulation and legislation would ever force us to put an inline-4 engine in an Aston Martin. Fundamentally, we make V12 and V8 engines.
Right.
And I'd love to continue to make V8 and V12 engines that sound terrific when you wake them up. When it wakes you up in the morning and that V12 goes. I don't know whether you've ever heard. Everybody here has heard an Aston Martin start up, right? I mean, it's just the best thing in the world. I was going to say something else, but I know I have to be politically correct because Simon's glaring at me. But it just is the best thing in the world. Now my view is, if sound is part of your heritage, what do you do in a world where there's a huge demand on emissions and CAFE and CAFC? My personal view and my personal conviction, and I say this as the guy that led the development of the Nissan Leaf, is that we have to go to the other extreme, which is we have to come with an electric Aston Martin. And we're working with a number of companies around the world, in both China and in the Valley, and we're looking at what does an electric Aston Martin look like. And I think it's obviously going to be very high-end. It's going to sit significantly above, for example, a Tesla, which, by the way, I have an enormous amount of respect for. Sure. And it has to deliver something other than what a Tesla can do. I mean, if you drive it in ludicrous mode, it has to last more than 50 seconds, for example. But if you try to put a raison d'etre around what an electric Aston should do, I would see it in the context of, it should, for example, it should provide 1,000 horsepower. It should be the fastest car around the Nordschleife. which is the Nürburgring, it should have a 0 to 60 time that knocks your pants off.
Yeah.
So it has to do something more. And the sound, or in this case, the lack of sound, is therefore still part of that visceral experience that you're getting from an Aston Martin.
Yeah.
So I'm a very great advocate of trying to find a solution where we can bring, for example, an electric Rapide or an electric DBX to the market, but not in the same context that Tesla are trying to democratize the electric vehicle, but in bringing something that is not per se ecologically friendly, but something that expresses the beauty of electric in a different way, which is in the context of great sports performance.
And your 3 values, again, power, you just said them before.
Yes.
Power,
beauty, soul.
And soul. So you, those are the 3 you're going to always want to be true to, no matter what you're doing.
And nothing in there says no electric.
Right. Power, but it says, but if it lacks power, it lacks beauty, or lacks soul, you made a mistake.
It's not an Aston Martin.
Right, got it. So let's go to the user experience, because, for example, I've never actually been in an Aston Martin, so I've gotten in and out of a Ferrari with help.
Yes.
And with a McLaren with more help.
Yes.
Is part of the user experience that I should become a contortionist here, or how's it?
We don't make the outright fastest cars in the world. We don't make the outright quickest accelerating cars in the world. We, simply speaking, make the most beautiful cars in the world.
Okay, so it's a beautiful.
And Marek could talk at length of why they're beautiful, but we essentially we follow the rules of nature. If you remember, I'm sure you'll do that Leonardo da Vinci drawing, which defines the golden proportions. That car that you see behind you is utterly defined by golden proportions. If you look at the glass house to the lower area, it's 1/3 to 2/3. If you look at the hood to the rest of the car, it's 1/3 to 2/3. If you look at the way that the A pillar drops away, it drops away in a way that it goes through the just under the center of the wheel. If you go outside and look at other vehicles, you'll find that the pillar goes after the wheel as you follow it through. Those don't mean anything to us on a day-by-day basis, but what they do is, because they represent the dimensions of nature, they make the cars timeless. Yeah. And that's what we define as beauty. And even when we're designing our crossover or our next generation of Lagonda, they will conform with that definition of beauty.
So let's, if that is the outside-in experience of an Aston Martin, we're all sort of outside of it, looking at it this way. If I'm driving it or owning it, how are you trying to create a differentiated experience from the inside out?
It fits like a glove. It's easy to drive. As I say, it's not an outright performance car. You can put it, we don't have a ludicrous mode, by the way, but basically you can drive it, you push the drive button, it's very easy, and you can drive it through the streets of San Francisco or Los Angeles or Palo Alto, and it's very easy to drive. Likewise, you can drop it into sports mode and turn off the traction control, and it will knock your pants off. But the point is, Aston Martin is not about demonstrating your midlife crisis. We do make them in red and yellow, but we don't outright go ahead to do that. It's not about that. Aston Martin is about a statement of maturity. It's a statement of when you've reached your point in your life where you no longer have anything to prove to anybody else. And that can happen at 17, it can happen at 70. But basically it's where you're inwardly satisfied with yourself, and you're not making a statement of my car's faster than your car's, which a lot of guys do in one way or another, right? It's basically about I'm satisfied with my life, this is a statement about my life, and I'm buying a piece of handcrafted British heritage, and this is just simply a demonstration of I've made it in life.
Okay, so that gets us to the last one, which is marketing, which is interesting. So a couple of things are coming to mind as I'm listening to you. One is a demographic, which is, as I listen to you, it does feel like we're going to tilt toward demographics which are maybe closer to my age than some of the people in the room, but just tilting that way. Tilting towards certain countries who have an Anglophile response. You don't open in France, or
There are a few Anglophiles in France.
Okay, good. Well, you did fight a war together. It's true.
Only for 100 years.
Yeah. So that's right. Well, that's how you got to know each other. Talk a little bit about because the company has gone out of business 7 times. It was always making beautiful cars, so that was not why it went out of business, right? No. So I think marketing may be closer to the nub here. What are some of the innovations that you've had to or that you want to undertake in the marketing front?
Well, as I said very clearly, we have to reach a different audience.
Yep.
I'm a great believer that marketing is not an art, and in fact it's a science. And what we have to do is we have to understand much better the purchasing funnel and the purchasing behavior. We know, for example, that the advocates behind the purchase of an Aston Martin are, in about 70% of the cases, they're females. They're the partner of the guy that's rewarding himself. What we don't fully understand is why those successful females are not rewarding themselves with an Aston Martin.
Right.
Because they're not, by the way, they're also, generally speaking, not buying Lamborghinis and Ferraris. So how do we reach that female audience, which is a potentially huge audience, given the advocation ratio?
Right.
So there's a big push. And I've created a female advisory board to try to help me to understand, right from the project inception, particularly of DBX, right through to the marketing strategy and the sales strategy, how we can make sure that our cars appeal more to females. Now, I'm not talking here about pinking it and shrinking it.
Right.
Because frankly, that's bullshit.
It is bullshit.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it not only alienates.
It's sexist bullshit, actually. But it's good.
So it not only alienates females, but it also alienates males.
Yes.
What I'm talking about is much more subtle. I'm talking about since the day that I walked into the car industry in 1979, the industry, to a man almost, has been making cars for guys. And why I say that is we start every design that we've ever done with a 98 or 99 percentile American male. And I don't know how much you know about the design of cars, but basically when you design a car, you start essentially with 3 points. You start with what's called the hip point here, and where that positions in the car. You have the heel point, which is where your throttle and clutch. I don't know whether you guys know what a clutch is.
If memory serves.
Yes. And brake. And you start with your steering position and your eye point. And everything starts there. And every single car that's ever been designed in the history of motoring starts with the big guy. Because the assumption has always been you make the big guy fit, and then everybody else can fit in the car. Now, when you make, I don't know whether we've got a 99 percentile person in here, but they're giants. And when you do that, you compromise the 5 percentile female.
Sure.
Because the 5 percentile female, basically her feet don't touch the pedals. I mean, basically, if you look at most women driving, their feet on the throttle is held like that. I don't know how you guys do it. We don't consider high heels. Well, Simon might, but I don't know about the rest of the world. But we don't consider the high heel. We don't consider the fact that when you have to pull forward to get your reach, the steering wheel is here, and by the way, therefore the airbag is here, and therefore the car simply doesn't fit. The compromises are all made on the female side, and small people, by the way, and there's no compromise made for the 99 percentile male. I think it's time that we change that model. So in designing the DBX, which is specifically aimed at other new customers,
Right.
And particularly Asian customers and female customers.
Smaller body, right?
It's basically, it basically designs around the 5% female in the first instance. And if there are any compromises to be made, it makes it around the 99 percentile person.
Got it.
So there may be a big guy out there that simply doesn't fit, and I don't give a shit.
Right. Well, you can buy one of your other cars.
Or you can buy one of my other cars.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the point, is that we're basically trying to make sure that the car fits from a visual point of view, fits from a power point of view, and fits from an ergonomic point of view. And that's not about finding somewhere to hang your handbag. It's about making sure that it fits like a glove. Yeah. And that's the revolution that we're trying to bring to this particular part of the industry, which I hope sets us apart from some of our contemporary counterparts.
Right. One last question, then I'm going to open it up to the audience here to engage with Andy. But just so in this valley, we spent a lot of attention around digital marketing over the last 10 years. It's probably the single most active sort of transformation revolution going on in this country's marketing as we move from venues that were offline to online. I don't know that it lends itself to the Aston Martin communication. How are you seeing the digital landscape from a point of view of communicating?
You can't escape digital marketing. It's simply an imperative, and well, maybe there are people out there that tweet more than me, but I tweet plenty. Mm-hmm.
Do Aston Martin drivers follow you on Twitter, or follow other drivers on Twitter?
Yes, they do. And actually, we've got, I think, 6.5 million followers on Facebook, for example. So there are people that follow us, and there's a lot of engagement with the brand. Now, as a product, I think that we're in many respects, we're the antidote to the Apple Watch, insofar as I would consider that we're all about analog.
Yeah.
The driving experience is analog. It fits in the same way as a high-end Swiss watch.
Yeah.
But I also think that there are a place, and I haven't got around to affording one yet, I think there's a place on the left wrist for an analog watch, and there's a place on the right hand for an Apple Watch, or I'm sure
Fitbit or whatever. Yes.
Or I'm probably not allowed to advertise Apple Watches. And that's
if they ship them, you would be.
And that's the reason, for example, we're working with a number of people in the Valley, and we're working, for example, with Le Show, LETV. Mm-hmm. I'm probably mispronounced the Chinese for TV, but it's something like Le Show. And we're looking for the best technologies around the world to help us with that infotainment and connectivity. We're not using that technology to separate the steering wheel from the wheel. From
the drive-by-wire, the whole drive-by-wire idea, or the distancing,
unless it becomes
auto-driving.
I mean, frankly speaking, I think we'll be the last car company in the world to adopt autonomous driving.
Yeah.
We might be the first car company in the world to adopt an autonomous drift button.
Okay.
But there are
a squealing tire is a happy tire, I was once told.
Exactly. So there are things that I think that when you buy an expensive Swiss watch, you have a different expectation of it. It's a thing of beauty. It's a thing of craftsmanship. You have a different expectation than when you buy an Apple Watch, which is, fulfilling a different need. Undoubtedly, in today's environment, your iPhone, your iWatch needs to have the capability to interface with your car. It's a kind of hygiene need. But that's not what the car is celebrating.
Right.
The car is simply celebrating that this is an analog, handcrafted vehicle, which is fulfilling the basic hygiene factors of
How
a car.
do I lock and start that car? Do I do that electronically, or do I do that mechanically?
You do it with a key. Have we got a key? It's a beautiful piece of...
Yeah, yeah.
He's not going to throw it to me because that's the key to an Aston Martin. So it has the.
By the way, it also can kill somebody at 30 yards if James Bond uses it.
Yeah. Actually, if you feel the weight of it, it probably could. So it has all the normal features, but most importantly, this is a piece of crystal glass on the top.
Okay.
With a.
And that's just for beauty.
And that's basically for beauty.
Yeah.
That's so that. So
it's
that,
like a Mont Blanc.
Yeah,
It
it is exactly like that. I'd like to think a little better.
Yes, it is.
And it's real crystal. And the point of an Aston is, whatever the material looks like, whether it looks like carbon, then it is carbon fibre. If it looks like wood, it is. If the switches in the car look like crystal glass, then they are crystal glass.
Got
it. And that's so when you integrate technology, it's okay to integrate technology as long as you don't fake what it is.
Yeah.
You know? So if it looks like a screen, then it needs to be a screen.
Do you have? I mean, the craftsman. Obviously, therefore, the craftsmanship is reaching back centuries. Do you have trouble finding a labor force to do that? I mean, where do you find your artisanal?
Man and boy. I mean, our factory's in a little place in Warwickshire called Gaydon, which is I mean, ironically, it's 5 miles down the road from where I went to school. It's 10 miles away from Stratford-on-Avon, if you've heard of
Stratford-on-Avon. I've never heard of that, no.
So, for those followers of Shakespeare. It's a farming community. And basically, people are there man and boy. We embrace the apprenticeship system. People come to us at 16 years old, and they train and they work with us for life. And they have particular skills. So the skill of cutting leather, for example, the skill of sewing leather, the skill of bonding leather to a substrate, the skill of working with aluminum, the skill of working with carbon fibre. These are skills that we inbreed with generation and generations of families.
So in terms of your supply chain, and then I will open it up to the group, do you outsource anything, or how do you?
We do, of course, we do outsource. But for example, and I invite anybody that would like to come to the factory. It is a beautiful experience. If you like seeing things made, there is nothing better than coming to the factory. But for example, whereas most, if not all, car companies would buy in their instrument panels, we make them in-house. Almost all car companies buy in their seats. We hand sew them and we make them in-house. All of the leather that's laid over the trim is done by craftsmen. So we do buy some stuff out, and we do buy, of course, from some of the big boys like Bosch and Continental, etc. And we are working, as I said, with a number of companies, particularly in the area of infotainment, where we recognise the skills of for example, Silicon Valley as the best in the world. But when we do that, we deliver it in our own way, which is consistent with the breed. But yeah, much of the car is in-house, much more than I've seen in my 30-odd years in the industry, because we can't get the kind of quality that we want outside. We do it in-house.
Does that create any complications for your dealers? Because I'm thinking about parts supply. I'm just thinking about, if I'm an Aston Martin dealer, how do I make sure I don't let the experience down in the last mile?
Yeah, well, I mean, we try to choose our dealers carefully in a way that they represent the brand in the way that we should. The brand itself is difficult to get the story, and we talked about marketing. Marketing is simply storytelling. It's simply telling the story of the brand. And the issue that we have with Aston Martin, if I can make the analogy, Aston Martin is a little bit like cricket. Now, I'm sure that everybody in the room has heard of cricket.
Yes. They make a little noise.
The problem with cricket is, I guess there's probably nobody beyond 2 or 3 of us in the room that know the rules of cricket.
Right.
It's a weird game that Englishmen play. We play for 5 days, by the way. By the way, I don't understand the Super Bowl either. So everybody knows cricket, but outside of a very small community, nobody really understands it. And that's the challenge of Aston, is everybody's heard of Aston Martin, but nobody really understands why it's special. Nobody understands that artisanship that goes into the production of the car, the beauty that I've explained and those golden proportions, what we mean by power, which is about adequate and is not about outright performance. And some way or other, our marketing, and frankly every member of the company is part of marketing, because if you come and visit the family, the girls on the line will show you, will market what they do. But we have to go out there and we have to eulogize, and we have to almost be a missionary of what we produce, of that beauty that we produce, and we have to teach the world about cricket.
I like it.
Often people ask me why we're so married to the concept of James Bond. And simply speaking, for me, James Bond is a perfect analogy with Aston Martin. James Bond is, I'm told, handsome. Not my sort, but he's athletic, he's good-looking, he appreciates the finer side of life, and he's a little bit naughty. And that perfectly describes Aston Martin. That's exactly what we are. So rather than, I would say, Aston Martin simply being the driver of, James Bond simply being a driver of Aston Martin cars, what we have to teach the world is, why does James Bond drive an Aston Martin? And he drives it because it fits hand in glove with his own personal values, which are, he basically expects the best things in life, the best looking things in life, and it needs to support his rather naughty lifestyle.
Yeah. And when you go to that DBX one, you're going to need to find a second icon, because it's a female icon.
Oh, I think most women love James Bond.
Is this enough? Okay. You said 5% or 9%. Okay. Well, listen. I've been monopolizing the conversation here. So as you're listening to Andy talk about, and basically this is a turnaround, right? It's been bankrupt 7 times, folks. So it's a pretty interesting challenge he's taken on, and he's taken on as a very clear set of values. Questions for him in terms of, yes, right here. Oh, wait a minute. We're going to do the microphone thing. Just give us just a second.
Good morning, and thank you on behalf of the 99th percentile, I guess. My question I have a few questions for you, but I guess the first one is, when you think about expanding the footprint of the brand, why don't you think about going sort of like down market and sort of like coming up with, I guess, call it the 3 Series competitor or something, maybe a 5 Series competitor for the sake of comparison, but something that is a bit more mass marketed.
We could, and that would be the easiest thing in the world to do. We could take that car over there and put a diesel engine in it. We could come down, and to some extent, I don't want to discredit anybody, but to some extent, that's what's happened with Porsche and Maserati, insofar as they've grown their volumes to much higher volumes. I don't want to do that. I want to keep. I want to position Aston Martin in the luxury space. I want it to be the Hermes of the auto industry. I want to celebrate those values, those handcrafted values. Now, if I make 300,000 cars a year, I'm no longer making handcrafted cars.
Right.
If I'm making 7,000 to 15,000 cars a year, I can still keep all of those values that I hope the customer values, that makes the cars very special. The fact that your car carries, that there are just over 2,000 people that work for Aston Martin. In every Aston Martin, it carries a little bit of the soul of those people, plus a little bit of the soul of James Bonder. But only one road.
But only one.
If we go into the role of mass production, and I've spent my life in mass production companies, you lose that. You lose that special.
Wasn't there an
soul.
incarnation of Aston Martin where Jaguar and Aston Martin were doing it together, and effectively they were trying to do a version of the down market Aston Martin and the Jaguar?
Essentially, at one moment, Aston Martin has been owned at one point or other by just about everybody. And at one moment it was owned by Ford, and it was held within the PAG group. You had Jaguar, Land Rover, Lincoln, Volvo, and Aston Martin. To some extent, the DB7, which is a few generations old, used a body that was manufactured from steel and was made in association with Jaguar. I don't think that was the high point of the brand, to be frank. And today, you can look at some of those older cars and people will criticize them for having full Mondeo switch gears. Yeah. I think we have to be somewhere else. And again, I make that analogy with the Hermes bag. We have to basically, there always needs to be one more customer than there is a car.
Yeah, it's interesting of playing with exclusivity. Yes, was there yes, next question. Yes, right here, please. Right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Savita and I'm from SAP. One question I had was that you talked about targeting women as a segment. How about creating relevance to the millennials and the brand for them? Thank you.
Yeah, and look, I'm not. This is a dangerous marketing message to say I'm trying to market a car to women, because in many cases that implies something else. The benefit of marketing a car that fits a woman is that women are by nature far more empathetic than men. So hopefully in marketing a car that is appealing to a woman, we're also making a car that's appealing to men. And hopefully by making a car that fits a woman, it also fits a high number of men as well, because not all men are 99 percentile. Within that, there is also very, very clearly there's a new generation of customers. Unfortunately, guys of our age are not.
I'm
always,
feeling younger already.
are not always going to exist, and we have to look at making sure that Aston Martin fits the next generation of customer. Now, one of the things that I hope I've brought to the company is in the design of our cars, we're not designing them for the guy that we know. The guy that we know who drives a DB9 today is white, middle class, lives in Warwickshire, drives it at the weekend, is relatively successful. Look, it would be nice to design my own car. What we try to do is we have a range of today of 4 cars, and we're going to add a further 3 cars to that portfolio. Three new cars in different segments. The first instruction that I gave to Marek when I joined the company was, first of all of our cars, whether they be the crossover DBX or whether they be the next generation DB9, at a glance they have to look like an Aston Martin. They have to contain all the values of the Aston Martin. You need to be able to look out the grille, and it needs to look like an Aston Martin. On the other hand, when you put all of our cars together, I need to be able to bring my 77-year-old mother into the room, and she needs to be able to tell the difference between the cars, which means they have to be obviously appealing to different customer types. We've now taken the whole, what we call the HLS customer base, which is basically those cars bought by high net worth individuals, and we've mapped all of those cars and we've mapped all of those customer attributes, and we've started to cluster where those customers are. And obviously some of those clusters are represented by middle-aged white guys like me, and some of those clusters are occupied by different people. For each of the clusters that we want our 7 cars to play in, we've nominated a proxy customer. So, for example, the proxy of the next generation Vanquish is a gentleman by the name of Richard. The proxy for the next generation Vantage is a gentleman by the name of Marcus, who's German. Quite good looking, by the way. It's Philippe, French guy, to your point. That's the next generation of DB9. In the case of the DBX, it's Charlotte. Charlotte may well be amongst us here because Charlotte is an American female, early 40s, lives in California, is very successful, and is looking to reward herself. And when we talk about the next Lagonda, we're talking about a gentleman by the name of Mr. Yang, who's obviously a successful Chinese businessman. So you see that basically by creating the proxy, I'm not saying that that proxy is the only customer, but when we talk about DBX, it's Charlotte, and Charlotte represents a number of customers, some of which are male, some of which are female. They tend to be younger. They're not, generally speaking, they're not extremely young because you have to have earned a certain amount of money to own an Aston Martin, frankly speaking. But they're generally speaking successful. Interestingly, in the case of China, 26% of women earn more than their male counterparts. So now there is a generation of millennials that are growing up that actually are earning more than their male counterparts. And we want to find a way of rewarding those people. Okay. So when we have to make compromises, we make the compromises around the target customer. And particular cars are aiming to particular customers, some of which are millennials.
I actually want to, as a guy who's been in marketing for a long time, I want to underscore a point Andy just made, which is in marketing we've always talked about segments. And when you talk about segments, you have a tendency to draw a circle and say, well, the people inside the circle are in the segment, the people outside are not. And what you discover is if you're not careful, you end up designing compromises all the way around the edges of that circle. And so what he described is the poster child principle, which is segments organize around center points, not around boundaries. And if you play to the center point and you market there, you will get people in the penumbra of that target. But it's a really important marketing lesson for everybody in the room. When you're doing segmentation, stop obsessing about the boundary and focus on the center point. Question over here. Yeah, next question.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Josh Aubin here. I want to sort of shift gears a little bit. As an really old car designer of the past, I noticed in your resume that you were associated with Nissan. And I happen to be very impressed with what Nissan has been doing. Their direction in innovation, I think, is quite impressive. And I wonder if you could take us just to shift gears a little bit from Aston, what that was like and how you entered into it and your influence in that area. It would be very helpful. Thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
My exit clause from Nissan has a confidentiality agreement about that thick, so I need to be careful on what I say. I was at Nissan for 23 years. I was in Japan for 13 of those years. I was on the executive committee since 2008, and I was basically responsible for all of the products of Nissan from 2008 onwards. And I'm pleased that you like the new generation of cars, and I'm extraordinarily proud of what we did during that period of time. And some of the best cars are just coming to market: the next generation Titan, the Maxima, the Murano, the Qashqai, which you don't get in the United States. But those are I think, stunning motor cars, and I think they've redefined the Nissan brand. Some of the principles that I talked about earlier about defining clusters and defining proxies or poster childs, as you call it, were exactly the product planning techniques that were used in Nissan. Nissan was a company that was generally categorized amongst the Japanese, and it was very difficult to see a distinction between Nissan, Toyota, Honda, and I have to say sometimes even the likes of Hyundai, because people are not quite sure about where the boundaries of Asia are. And we needed, and I was responsible for product, I was responsible for marketing, I was responsible for global sales. We needed to find a way of making Nissan distinct from Toyota. Toyota has a wonderful reputation. They make absolutely beautifully reliable vanilla cars.
No, that's right.
And no,
Yeah, right.
and
It's absolutely true.
I mean, if you want a car to go from A to B forever by a Toyota, if you want to make a statement of yourself, then you need maybe something else. We needed to find a different space for Nissan, and that's where the brand positioning statement of innovation that excites was born from. Now, when you make a statement of innovation that excites, then you need to make sure that your brand values are born in the DNA of the products that you deliver. And a lot of the things that we did, for example, the Nissan Leaf, a statement to bring autonomous driving cars to the market by 2020, innovation in some of the body types, things like Murano, putting a diesel engine into a Titan 150 class truck, going to Le Mans with a front-wheel drive car, were all about living that raison d'etre of innovation that excites. Now, if I draw the parallel back to Aston Martin, because when you spend 23 years in a company, working for a very inspirational leader like Carlos
Carlos. Yeah,
Ghosn,
I was going to ask you about him.
and you watch a person, you work closely with somebody like that, and you see all the good things and you see some of the bad things. It can't help but rub off on you. And some of the things that he did in turning around Nissan are entirely relevant to the turnaround of Aston Martin. But some of the things that I learned with my colleagues around living the raison d'etre of the brand positioning and creating the proxy customer, I think are also relevant to Aston Martin. And in adopting the brand position of Power, Beauty, Soul, we now have to go out there and we have to live it. And we have to live it in a way that has a greater appeal than it previously had, and with a slightly different business model that we previously had.
Great. So 2 more questions, and then we're going to be done.
There's a young lad over here.
Yes, right over here. Okay, over here, and then we'll make the last one
here.
Yeah, we'd like to hear from the young man, please.
On behalf of our millennials.
Yes. Yeah, please. No, please, yes.
I saw it, like the Aston Martin 177. It only made 77 of them, and they go for a fairly good price. Since I think all of them were sold, can't you make one like a version of that? Since like a lot of people like it, can you make like a version of that which people can like buy? But it's like it goes for a good price and and is quality and looks as good as the Aston Martin 177.
Okay.
Very good.
It's a great question.
The lady that was worried that we may not appeal to the millennials, I think she.
No.
The 177 is a really special car, and I'd love for you to drive it, and maybe afterwards you talk to that nice man down there, and he might be able to get you a little spin in a 177, and that would put you amongst a very, very special class of people. We sold those cars, I think, for £1.2 million each.
Pounds.
That's
more than $1.
It's not a measure of weight.
It's close. We're pushing $2 million, aren't we?
$2 million.
Yeah. Okay.
Today, in the second-hand market, they're selling for 1.8 million cars. So we don't do depreciation. We do those cars because they are very special and because people want something that is extraordinarily exclusive. And we'll never make a 78th 177. However, if you've got a really, really wealthy dad, so the principles of 177, and by the way, the car is entirely made in composites. It uses fundamentally carbon fibers. We've just created a car called the Vulcan, which is quite a cool name, isn't it? It's nothing to do with Star Trek. It's 24 cars, which are track only, and uses the basic tub, the safety cell of the 177. And again, it's extremely exclusive. I would call it a celebration of the best of Aston Martin designs. It's a 7-litre V12 engine, naturally aspirated, 820 brake horsepower, a straight cut sequential gearbox, and it looks utterly gorgeous. And we've made 24 of them, and we've so far sold 19, so there's 5 left.
But what's interesting, from the question, what's interesting is we want to be exclusive, but we don't want to exclude. I mean, your whole design principle about I'm tired of the 99 excluding the 5%, right? So, but clearly the other answer here is we don't want. So let me ask a question about your investors. So often people go down market because the investor says, look, we need a bigger return on our investment. Your market's too small. You've got to expand your market. You've got to go down market. Who are your investors, and what do they expect from you?
We're dinosaurs in, if you wish it, but we're the last of the British-owned car companies. Every other British car company is owned by somebody else. Jaguar Land Rover is owned by Tata, the Indian company.
Rolls-Royce?
Sometimes, like Rolls-Royce is owned by BMW. Bentley is owned by Volkswagen Group. We like to think sometimes Ford as being a UK company, but if you think back in history, at one moment British Leyland was the biggest car company in the world.
That's right.
And we're what's left.
So your investors are part investing in heritage?
They're partly invested in heritage.
Okay.
And we're owned by private equity.
Okay.
So we have a number of Kuwaiti families. We have an Italian family.
And they buy into your values, not just the return on capital? Well, sometimes.
At the end of the day, they're a private equity company, but companies. But what we've tried to persuade them is that the best way of bringing value to the brand is to remain in that exclusive area.
Yeah.
Now, let me give you. Now we get down to, if there's accountants in the room, you'll know more about this than me. But if you look at the multiples on EBITDA for a car company, it's typically 4 times.
Okay.
If you look to a premier car company like Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, the multiple is typically 6 times, and that's about as good as it gets in the car industry. As Sergio Marchioli says, we're capital junkies. If you look at Hermes, I think their multiple is something like 18 times.
Okay.
So if you're presenting to an investor community, do you want to be a car company or do you want to be a luxury company? My view is, if we want to be a car company, then we better go out and make 200,000 cars.
Yeah.
And that would be very easy. But the multiple on your EBITDA is going to be 6.
Yeah.
If we remain in that exclusive, elusive place of basically being cross-shopped with Chanel and Hermes and Jimmy Choo shoes and that kind of thing, then we're in that multiples of 10 and above. And that, for the investors, in my mind, is a much better place to be.
Got it. One last question, and then we're done. Okay, I have this gentleman right here, I guess. Sorry about it. And by the way, Andy, can you be here for a few minutes later? We'll stay up here.
This is a big subject, but maybe just a few comments about Aston Martin racing. As you're probably aware, right now Aston Martin, for the first time ever, is leading a major American racing series, incidentally with a female driver.
Yes.
Yeah. And it could be the ultimate win on Sunday, drive on Monday kind of car.
Wow. Yes. So talk about this.
So you perfectly... that's a perfect example of marketing marketing on one hand and living the DNA on the other. Our DNA. Does anybody here know why we're called Aston Martin?
We thought there was a guy named Aston and another one named Martin.
Well, actually, there was a guy called Martin. It was a guy called Lionel Martin.
Okay.
And his first car that he made, he raced it up Aston Hill. So at the very heart of our DNA, we are a racing company. Now, I've listened to all the marketing bullshit. I'm probably not allowed to say that word. About
what marketing? I mean, bullshit's fine, but it's marketing. Yeah, go ahead.
They kind of fix it. He did tell you I'm an engineer. Yeah. But so many car companies go racing and then they tell you it's part of our fundamental DNA and we take what we learn on the track and we move it to the road and vice versa. And it is,
yes, marketing.
It's marketing. That's not true of Aston Martin. From the very inception of our very, very first car, we've taken what we learned from the track and we move it to the road. And we take what we learn from the road and we move it to the track. And that's why we stay in WEC, GT3, GT4, GTE type of classes, because the cars look like the ones that you buy. And I personally race, for example, a GT4, and it's essentially a car that comes off the end of the line and we go race it. It's very key to the brand. So being successful in the American series is very important to us. Being successful with a female driver is a great demonstration of just how good our cars are for female drivers and the fact that they're not intimidating and that you guys should go and try one, and it's a position that we want to enhance in the future. So I mean, you can, when you go racing, you know, it's a bit of a flip of the coin on where you come. You go with your best cars and you go with your best drivers, and you hope in the end that basically sure. You toss the dice enough times and you win. And where we are at the moment, and I don't want to tempt Providence, is we're winning the series. And it says such a lot about the reliability of the car, the beauty of the car, and our intention to look for both American customers and female customers of a different demographic. And, you know, touch wood, we'll be very successful. But I love where we are, and I love the way that the team is performing.
That's great. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen. But before I do, please help me thank Andy for his talk. Thank you very much. And Karen?
Thank you very much for sharing your insights, your humor. Had a wonderful morning. Hope that you did too. As a small gesture of our appreciation, we have for you the Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
Oh, boy. Power, beauty, and soul. All right, here we go. All right, where's that photo opportunity? Here we are. Yes, there we are.
Turn it around.
Okay.
Turn it around.
Oh, turn it around?
Turn it around.
What's it say?
You tell me.
I can't read it. Oh, yes.
We think it would look awfully well next to an Aston Martin or in one. So please do wear that in good health. A recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel, hopefully within a day or so. And there you will find most of our other programs as well. We hope that you find that to be a useful resource. Thanks again to Aston Martin and Le Show. We thank you. You've been a wonderful audience, and have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.